Up ahead, at the crosswalk near a construction zone, 3 children, 2 boys and a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stood on the curb waiting for the signal to change. Laughing, they nudged each other, their backpacks bouncing with each movement. A crossing guard usually manned that spot, but today it was empty. Keanu squinted, sensing something off. Then it happened. A large semi-truck barreled down the adjacent lane, its horn blaring, driver screaming into a phone, oblivious to the red light blinking ahead. Keanu's heart stopped. The children, unaware, stepped onto the street. There was no time to think. No time to hesitate. Keanu floored the accelerator. The Ferrari roared like a beast unleashed, screeching out of the lane and across the divider. Tires shrieked as metal blurred, the car hurtling straight into oncoming traffic. Gasps erupted from the stopped cars. Some screamed. Others ducked. But Keanu didn't blink. He swerved the Ferrari diagonally, placing the car directly between the truck and the children, using his own vehicle as a barrier. At the last possible second, he yanked the wheel, triggering the traction control, and braced for impact. The screech of the truck's brakes was deafening. The crash never came. The truck skidded to a violent halt inches from the Ferrari's passenger side. The kids stood frozen, wide-eyed, barely comprehending what had just happened. Keanu jumped out, heart pounding, adrenaline rushing, and rushed to them. "You okay?" he asked, kneeling beside the smallest one, who nodded tearfully. A boy wrapped his arms around Keanu's neck, sobbing. The girl clutched her backpack so tight her knuckles turned white. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video so you don't miss tomorrow's video. Phones appeared. Sirens wailed in the distance. A police cruiser, an ambulance, and a fire truck swarmed the scene within minutes, but Keanu Reeves stayed exactly where he was, kneeling on the asphalt, one arm wrapped protectively around the smallest boy, the other steadying the little girl who was still in shock. The truck driver, a middle-aged man in a sweat-stained shirt, stumbled out of his cab, his face pale, hands trembling. I didn't see the light," he stammered. I was on a call. Oh God, those kids." But Keanu wasn't looking for blame. He was focused on the children. "Hey," he said softly to the girl, his voice like warm velvet, "you're really brave, you know that?" She looked up, eyes wide, tears hanging like glass on her lashes. "You're safe now. All of you are." An EMT approached, moving gently. "Sir, we need to check them out." Keanu nodded and slowly stood, letting go with great care. Only then did people realize he had thrown himself into danger without a second thought. Not for fame, not for cameras, but because it was the right thing to do. The Ferrari, his beloved car, was scratched, dented, the side mirror hanging loose. But Keanu hadn't even looked at it once. A police officer came over, notepad in hand. "Mr. Reeves." Keanu gave a small nod, brushing dust off his jeans. "We're going to need a statement." That was, the officer paused, trying to find the right word. Heroic. "I didn't do anything anyone else wouldn't have done," Keanu replied with that quiet humility that made him a legend not just on screen, but off. "I just happened to be there." But the officer knew better. Everyone did. Behind them, a crowd had formed, watching the man who just risked his life. And not one person reached for an autograph. They just watched in silence, grateful, awed, maybe even changed. The children, all unharmed, were led to the ambulance. But before the doors closed, the smallest one turned back. "Mr. Keanu?" "Yeah, buddy." The boy gave him a tired, crooked smile. "You're like Batman, but real." Keanu chuckled. "Not," he said. "Batman wears more armor." And as the ambulance pulled away, Keanu finally turned to look at the wrecked Ferrari, his prized possession. He walked over, placed a hand on the hood, and whispered, "Thank you." The headlines flooded every news feed, every major broadcast, every social media timeline. Footage captured by onlookers had gone viral in hours. But while the internet buzzed with disbelief and admiration, Keanu Reeves stayed silent. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't post about it. He didn't even tell his closest friends. He just went home. But the world wouldn't let it go. At a small press gathering 2 days later, originally scheduled to promote his next film, a reporter couldn't hold back. "Keanu," she asked, her voice trembling slightly, "can you tell us what went through your mind when you drove into oncoming traffic?" Keanu paused. The room went completely still. He gave a small nod, scratched the back of his neck like someone embarrassed by attention, and then said, "There wasn't time to think. There were just 3 kids who needed someone to show up." A beat. And then applause, genuine and unscripted, erupted from the entire room. But later that night, while the world discussed heroism and selflessness, Keanu sat alone in his quiet living room, a cup of black coffee in hand. On the table in front of him was a thank you drawing from the smallest boy, a crayon sketch of a red Ferrari, a truck, and a stick figure with long hair holding 3 kids like superheroes do. 3 days had passed since the rescue. The world was still buzzing, but for Keanu, things had finally grown quiet enough for the next step, the one that truly mattered to him. He didn't tell his team. He didn't alert the press. He simply asked one of the EMTs who had been on the scene, "Can you tell me where the kids live? I just want to make sure they're okay." An hour later, Keanu stood on the worn concrete steps of a modest, 2-story house in East LA. The yard was small but tidy. A tricycle leaned against the fence. Sidewalk chalk drawings of suns, rockets, and uneven stick figures were scattered along the path. He adjusted his jacket, took a breath, and knocked. The door creaked open, and there she was, the mother. Eyes red from days of fear and lack of sleep. Shoulders tense, like she hadn't stopped bracing for the next hit from life. But when she saw who it was standing on her doorstep, her breath caught in her throat. "Mr. Reeves," she asked, stunned. Keanu gave a gentle nod. "Hi. I just wanted to check in. See how the kids are doing." For a moment, she said nothing. Then tears welled up in her eyes, and she opened the door wider. "Please, come in." The living room was simple, humble. A faded couch. Toys neatly tucked into bins. Family photos on the wall, some framed, some taped. And there, sitting on the floor, were the 3 kids. They looked up, gasped, and ran. Mr. Keanu, the youngest, squealed, flinging himself into his arms. Keanu crouched to meet them, hugging them close. "Hey, superheroes," he said with a soft smile. "You holding up okay?" "We're good," said the older boy, eyes shining. "Mom says you're like an angel." Keanu glanced up at their mother. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped her cheeks with the corner of her sleeve. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "I keep thinking, what if you weren't there?" "You don't have to thank me," Keanu said gently, still kneeling. "I was just in the right place. And I'm really glad I was." Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I know it's not much, but if your family needs anything, repairs, groceries, school supplies, anything, there's a number inside. No strings. Just let me help." She hesitated, staring at it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. But then, slowly, she took it out, hand shaking, heart full. News coverage faded, but the story lived on. At the local elementary school, where the children returned just a week later, something had shifted. Teachers greeted them with warmer smiles. Classmates who once ignored them now waved and asked questions, not about the truck or the fear, but about Keanu. Did he really drive into traffic? Did he talk like in the movies? Did he give you a high five? But more than that, something deeper was taking root. It started with a school assembly. The principal, Ms. Delgado, invited the mother to speak. Nervous, heart-pounding, she stood at the mic in the tiny gymnasium packed with parents and children. But she didn't tell the story for sympathy. She told it to remind people what courage looked like and what it didn't wear. "He didn't have a cape," she said softly. "He wasn't in costume. He was just someone who acted when it mattered." Somewhere in the crowd, a father wiped his eyes. A 4th-grade teacher clapped a little longer than the others. And in the back row, unnoticed, Keanu stood against the wall, cap pulled low, quietly listening. After the assembly, he slipped away, leaving behind a sealed letter and a $10,000 donation to the school's safety improvement fund. No publicity, no credit, but the ripple had begun. Local auto shops began offering free vehicle inspections for school buses and crossing guard vehicles. A nearby high school started a Real Heroes essay contest. One winner wrote about Keanu and titled her piece "Bravery in Denim." A food pantry opened 2 blocks from the kids' home, funded in part by anonymous donors who, when questioned, simply said, "We were inspired." But Keanu wasn't done. At night, after long days on set or interviews he didn't really care for, he sat on his porch, that little boy's crayon drawing still taped beside his door. It reminded him, not all heroes wear leather trench coats. Sometimes they wear bruises and keep going. That week, he made a decision. He wouldn't just help this family. He would start something bigger. Quiet, like him, but powerful, like the moment he turned the wheel into danger. Keanu never did things for applause. So when he founded the Red Light Project, it wasn't launched with a celebrity gala or flashing cameras. It started with a single building, an old, unused community center in East Los Angeles. No grand ribbon cutting. No spotlight. Just a fresh coat of paint, a new sign over the door, and a mission printed in small silver letters. Protecting the ones who walk the crosswalk. The Red Light Project had a singular focus, protecting children in overlooked neighborhoods, not just from speeding trucks, but from all the dangers that come when safety takes a back seat. It offered after-school care for working parents, neighborhood crossing guards funded directly by the foundation, emergency preparedness training in public schools, and scholarships for kids who showed extraordinary bravery, like Leo, the boy who waved goodbye from the ambulance. Keanu funded it himself. Quietly, he turned down 3 endorsement deals and funneled the money directly into the project. No press releases, no interviews, just impact. People started to notice. City officials reached out. Volunteers offered time. Teachers signed up for workshops. One small act, a wild, instinctual drive into oncoming traffic, had sparked something far bigger than the moment it began. But Keanu, as always, stayed behind the scenes. Sometimes he dropped by unannounced, wearing a hoodie and faded jeans, helping repaint the walls or restocking snacks. Kids knew him only as Mr. K, the tall man who gave them books and high fives and never treated anyone like they were small. And that red Ferrari? Still scratched, still dented, but it sat, proudly untouched, in a glass garage built onto the side of the new community center, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. It was a cool Wednesday evening when she showed up, leather jacket, dusty boots, and an expression caught somewhere between admiration and disbelief. Claire Park hadn't seen Keanu Reeves in years. Not since they wrapped River's Edge, when they were both just wide-eyed kids trying to figure out the movie business. But she had heard the story. Everyone had. She stepped onto the front path of the Red Light Project Center, pausing to look at the dented red Ferrari sitting quietly under soft lights. "Of course," she murmured. "Only you would make this your statue." Inside, Keanu was helping a teenager figure out how to fix a jammed paper shredder. He glanced up, surprised, when he saw her framed in the doorway. "Claire," he said, wiping his hands with a towel. "Well, you look like I biked across the city for this," she finished, raising an eyebrow. "You dodged death in a Ferrari, built a foundation, and I had to find out through a grocery store magazine rack?" Keanu chuckled softly. "Didn't think it needed a press tour. You saved 3 kids and turned it into a movement," she said, stepping in and lowering her voice. "That's not just a story, Keanu. That's legacy." He didn't respond right away, just looked out the window at the kids playing foursquare under dim lights. One of them was Leo, the boy from the crosswalk, now laughing louder than anyone else. Claire followed his gaze, softened, and said, "I'm working on something too. Something big. But it's messy, and it's going to need people who understand real courage." Keanu turned to her. "Claire, what are you asking?" "I'm asking," she said slowly, "if you'd help me build another red light project. But this time in New Orleans. There's a neighborhood down there where 3 kids don't get crosswalks. They dodge cars every morning just to get to school. Someone's going to get hurt, Keanu. And I think you might be the only person crazy enough to stop it." There was a long pause. Then Keanu smiled. "Tell me where to start." The air in New Orleans was thick, humid, electric, and buzzing with life in a way Los Angeles never quite matched. Jazz spilled from every corner cafe, laughter echoed off wrought iron balconies, and yet beneath the vibrance, there were cracks. Forgotten streets. Forgotten kids. Forgotten promises. Keanu stepped out of the modest rental car, no red Ferrari this time, and into the heart of the Treme district, where Claire had set up a temporary field office for the expansion of the Red Light Project. He hadn't been back to New Orleans in over a decade. The last time was for a film shoot, and for something else. Something he rarely talked about. A girl named Elise. A love that ended not in fire, but in silence. The kind of quiet loss that never made headlines but hollowed you out from the inside. Now, the city welcomed him back with memories stitched into every streetlight. As he and Claire walked the narrow blocks, they passed children playing jump rope dangerously close to speeding cars. Buses rumbled by without slowing. Crosswalk signs flickered, some didn't work at all. "This is the corner," Claire said quietly, pointing to a 4-way intersection with no crossing guard, no light, and no protection. "A little boy was hit here last month. Broke his arm. Lucky it wasn't worse." Keanu stood still, watching as a girl with pigtails darted across the street, a backpack bouncing behind her, never once looking up. He winced. "Okay," he said, his voice gravelly. "Let's fix this." In the days that followed, Keanu became more than a name on a project. He was boots on the ground. He helped repaint faded curb markers, met with city officials, walked neighborhoods with volunteers. But more than anything, he listened. To mothers who had lost sleep fearing to walk to school. To teenagers who had never met a father figure. To children who didn't know what safety felt like. At night, when the city slept, Keanu sat alone in the back of the tiny office, flipping through old newspaper clippings. He found one from the Times-Picayune, a photo of him from that old film, standing next to Elise. Young, carefree. Before the fame, before the heartbreak. He folded the paper gently and tucked it into his coat. The past was here. So was his purpose. And the next morning, a construction crew arrived to begin building New Orleans' first community-funded school safety zone, fully sponsored by the Red Light Project. It started with painted lines. Then came signs. Then came hope. It was supposed to be a celebration. After 2 months of late nights, early mornings, and silent grit, the first phase of the Red Light Project's New Orleans branch was complete. The new crossing system was installed outside Claiborne Elementary, fresh signs, blinking lights, and a bright yellow mural painted by local kids that read, "Safe steps start here." Keanu stood beside Claire as the principal cut a ribbon with oversized scissors. Local news crews hovered, and for once, Keanu didn't dodge the camera, because this wasn't about him. It was about the girl in a pink jacket clutching her brother's hand. It was about the grandmother nodding slowly in approval. It was about the change you could feel under your feet. But change has a way of being tested. 2 days later, a storm rolled in. Heavy winds knocked out power across the city, and with it, the blinking lights at the crossing. It was early morning, and Keanu had just pulled into the lot with coffee when he heard the screech. His heart dropped. He sprinted toward the sound, past a stopped school bus, past the gathered crowd, and found a small boy sitting on the pavement, shaken but okay. His bike lay mangled nearby, hit by a car that didn't see him in time. The driver, horrified, was already on the phone with 911. Keanu knelt beside the child, his hand trembling as he checked for injuries. No blood. No breaks. Just tears and terror. "You're safe now," he whispered, the same words he'd once said in Los Angeles. "I've got you." But inside, he was unraveling. This was exactly what the Red Light Project was built to prevent. And it had failed. Not because of neglect, but because he hadn't thought far enough ahead. Later that night, Keanu sat alone on the office roof, the skyline flickering in the distance. Claire joined him, offering silence instead of comfort. She knew the look in his eyes. He was carrying it all. "You can't stop every storm," she said gently. "But I should have seen it coming," he muttered. "I've lived through storms. I should know how fast things break." She hesitated. "You're not talking about traffic anymore, are you?" Keanu closed his eyes. "No," he said. "I'm not." He told her then about Elise. About how, years ago, he'd promised to help her build a youth center right here in the city. But before they could start, she got sick. Cancer. Quick, cruel. She passed before a single brick was laid. And Keanu? He left. Not out of coldness, out of grief. "I told myself I'd come back," he whispered. "I never did. Not until those kids." Claire reached over, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then maybe this isn't just about fixing what's broken. Maybe it's about finishing what you started."